I see a couple familiar faces on here, so some of what I'm going to say has been covered before, but I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't do a little bit of background on what we are as Virginia Consensus for Higher Ed in Prison and how we came to be. And just kind of talk a little bit about the work that's going on. As Sheila said, we had a wonderful event last week at Bright Point Community College, the Chester campus. I talk a little bit about how education within the prison system became such an issue. And in 1994, through the Tough on Crime Act and a lot of those bills that came out by our federal government, one of the things that was lost was Pell funding. Eligibility for Pell funding was suspended for folks incarcerated. So in 1994, we went from around 1,200 prison education programs to seven by 1999. And we spent about 20 years with no significant prison college prison education programs. And to be more specific, we're talking about degree granting programs, associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. While a lot of the trades remained, correctional trades like welding, electricians, pub plumbing, HVAC, those trades kind of remained in the prison system, but the degree granting programs were taken away. And these degree granting programs are what leads to what we call economic mobility. Um, Under President Obama, he decided that they would start some pilot programs. And those pilot programs made their way to Virginia, to about four different institutions using certain community colleges like Piedmont Virginia Community College, Southside, Danville, and I think Rappahannock. And these community colleges set up the first PEP programs since the restoration of Pell. So interestingly, it was under Donald Trump who, in his prior um, term, that he signed the legislation necessary that made restore Pell funding eligibility for those incarcerated. My program director was aware of this, and she wanted to figure. She started tracing or basically trying to protect the money and make sure it wasn't exploited by a lot of these private companies. And in her exploration, she was able to see this huge gap, like what could be done in terms of making this a thing. Um, just like me, when I first heard about this, I thought this was a simple issue. Hey, man, just bring college programs back, put them in prisons. But there's a lot of technicalities. There's technology, for example, that's a huge deal with Wi-Fi and bandwidth at these particular prisons. And then there's overall the penal philosophy in general of different departments of corrections across the country, or whether or not they wanted to accept this. And then I was able to learn a lot about statistics, who tells us that um, education is like the highest determinant of, or one of the highest determinants of the recidivism rates, the lowering of recidivism. And it's directly related to your level of education. So if you get a GED, then you reduce your recidivism to this much. If you get a trade, then you reduce it to this much. And if you get an associate's degree, farther down, bachelor's, farther down, all the way up to a master's, where there happens to be 0% recidivism. So the lack of education, the investment of education literally leads to the restoration or rehabilitation of individuals in such a meaningful way that it stops them from coming back to prison. Another element of this was that this mentality of come home and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And so, you just come get a job, whatever you can take, whether it's the McDonald's down the street or the Walmart. I do not knock any of those jobs. We need good employees at those jobs. However, for a person coming home from prison after an extended amount of time with court costs and maybe child support costs and all of the other challenges that come with being formally incarcerated, it started to become incumbent upon us that we need to figure out a path to economic mobility. So college is that path. Being able to tie educational offerings to high demand occupations was something that the Virginia Consensus decided to take under their belt. And so we did a lot of work with VOE, the Virginia Office of Education and Economics, And we learned a lot about what fields are hiring and what fields are paying meaningful money, and what college courses do we need to be offering to make sure that this group is equipped with this. To put this in perspective in terms of scale, Virginia is releasing, the latest number is 12,000 people every year. 12,000. That is higher than the largest graduating class in the state, which is George Mason University. So here we have an opportunity to not just do charitable work, which is what I usually talk about during faith-based organization, because we are people of conscience and it matters to us in that way. But even in terms of practicality, this is a workforce issue. This is a chance for us to strengthen the Commonwealth's workforce in a way that is kind of unprecedented. We're approaching something called an enrollment cliff, where just not a lot of babies were born 18 to 20 years ago. And so colleges are seeing enrollments go down and will continue to go down. And here we have another remedy. We have these students, which, according to statistics in Virginia, 62% of people are prepared or have their GED, and could be possibly entered into college classes. It is a hugely underserved community. And from a personal perspective, I want to say that the greatest resource that a person has while incarcerated is time. And the waste of that time is what will determine whether or not they're successful upon reentry. And there are some people incarcerated who are self motivated and who are self taught and who study every day and read every book that they can get their hands on. And there's other people who don't necessarily have that discipline or direction. And if they're not offered that, then they often come home either worse products than when they went in, or not having made much progress at all. And so then we see this cycle of recidivism. Um, we've also done research into the first gen aspect of this. We know that first generation college students, their offspring, off the chances of them completing college and going on to be successful shoots through the roof when someone breaks that cycle. And for folks incarcerated, there's a ton of first gen. Um, there's a ton of first gen students who would be earning the first degree in their families. And this is another thing to remember is that this is a really underserved community. These guys these men and women who are incarcerated are usually already from places where they haven't gotten access to good education or to decent jobs or to decent trainings. And a lot of times these folks have been told that they're disposable. And so when it comes to offering college in prison, there's so many aspects of it that I would take a while to cover. But I do want to add this aspect, which is the humanistic approach of it. In prison is ran, the Department of Corrections is a paramilitary organization. In other words, you won't find a bunch of soft and cuddly spaces in prison. You'll find a bunch of hard concrete walls and steel bars, and you'll hear people, officers that don't even refer to you by name. They refer to you by number. They're yelling. There's not a lot of interpersonal relationships in prison. But an example of when it is when educational faculty come into prison and they treat these people like students and they refer to them by name and they take an interest in their personal life stories. And this education becomes the thing that these students look forward to above all things every day. Like every day, they can't wait to get it, to get into those college classes because it's a release, it's an escape from their daily conditions, and they embrace it in ways that the faculty themselves that we talk to on a regular basis say that there's a difference between an incarcerated student and their counterparts out here in the free world. And that difference is these folks cherish the opportunity and they hunger and they are better, they become better students. They often win a lot of the contests for essay writings and all the other things because they have the time to invest in it. And then for employers, which our event was geared towards employers, um, the retention rate for those folks who have been formerly incarcerated is much longer. And I'll tell you why. Because people call this a second chance. We prefer to call it a fair chance. but the folks who have been formerly incarcerated quite often look at it like their last chance, and they value it in ways that some of their counterparts may not. And so, there's just a win-win all the way around. I will say, last year we introduced House Bill 2158, which was a comprehensive overhaul of the Virginia Department of Corrections whole educational system. We were able to carve out some of the language related to higher education, prison, and college courses and things of that nature. And as a person who's kind of worked in criminal justice reform for quite a few years now, this was the very first time I was able to uh, lobby for a bill that has so much bipartisan support. That is a rarity. That is a rarity, I promise you. But we made it out of the House at 82 to 17, and we made it out of the Senate unanimously. Unfortunately, our Governor Youngkin decided to send it back with some amendments in which he wanted to delay the enactment for a year. We refused those amendments in the form of Delegate Betsy Carr and Corner, and he ended up vetoing the bill. We didn't see a need to delay it. Jay Lark is already doing a study on it. I say all that to say that we are already in the process of trying to figure out what this legislation will look like going into next year. The good thing about it, though, is once again, unlike criminal justice reform bills involving prison, Virginia Department of Corrections is usually in opposition to, but we have them as partners. We had the director and deputy director on panels last week, speaking highly of their intention of expanding college programs throughout the Department of Corrections. There's a lot of issues at places like Red Onion and Walnut Ridge, allegations of abuse and torture. And they even talked about bringing college education to those institutions in Southwestern Virginia. And for a person who has fought against those conditions, I find that very encouraging because what it means to bring college into prisons is also bringing a set of outside eyes. The Department of Corrections kind of operates in a cloak of secrecy. They're kind of empowered to do so at the interest of public safety, and so they do a lot of things kind of clandestinely. And so to have an opportunity to bring non-DOC faculty into those prisons is a win for me. To have these people in there to communicate with these folks, there's just a lot of elements to this that just works in the favor of prison reform in general. So we do have this election coming up, which is huge for us to get everybody civically engaged to come out and vote and put the right legislators in place. But then we're going to hit the ground running in January, whatever form of legislation we end up drawing up. Because we do have voluntary cooperation that I'm really proud of. And I've worked with our program director, Terry Irwin, really hard at kind of cultivating these relationships. And so we had this voluntary collaboration, but we want to seal the deal with legislation that says, hey, it's nice that you volunteered, but now, according to law, we have to. So that's kind of, the space that we're in now. And as we look for congregational support, we just believe that here at VICPP that education is a lifelong right. It's something that everybody should have a right to. And in fact, for those of the population who have made mistakes and have been caught for those mistakes, we believe that education is more important to them than anybody else, because that is the key to them being successfully transformed. And education is a powerful method of transformation. So we are looking to continue to work with congregations in our base to spread awareness, to participate in events, and to build relationships and advocate for change. So every faith community is invited to consider what level of support that they would like to offer. All faiths believe in justice, and what capacity that is determined upon the congregations themselves and what resources they are available to offer. We Sheila and I kind of decided to break this down into core congregations or wider circle congregations, for lack of a better word, to gauge the levels of commitment that folks would like to commit to. But core, for example, when it comes to spreading awareness, a core congregation might hand out congregational cards, offer formation to offer information to members, share VCHEP and the website. But a wider circle congregation might share invites and information on bulletins and social media. Uh, and participating in events. Core congregations might host a workshop with VCHEP that I would be happy to come through. I made it to the Quakers meeting the weekend before last and had an absolute ball. Hey, Monica. And we really enjoyed it and got such a favorable response from everyone. And so I'm also planning an event in November that will partner all of this faith-based outreach with reentry organizations so that folks will know who in the community is actually on the ground doing the work. And so that when people want to volunteer, they have places to volunteer at and things to be a part of. I've done quite a few meetings here in Richmond with reentry organizations, and they are everywhere, and they don't just pop up on Google. So it's a pretty intense search. I have to go to these places, go to the Charlottesville, which I went to the Charlottesville area and actually found a couple out there. And so we're looking to make these relationships so that people are aware of the existence of these organizations and learn that volunteering, aiding, and assisting these organizations is a volunteer and aid and assist being a commonwealth. Um, we're going to make that invite to everybody on this call to come to this November event. Um, encouraging people to share resources with family members, connect VCHAT with other interested parties. Like I said, if you know of reentry groups that I have not touched yet or that we have not touched yet, we'd be happy to hear about those groups, set up Zoom calls or maybe in-person visits to see the work that they're doing and try to connect the right people at the right time. And so, just general advocacy for change. When we go into January, we're always looking for testimony and for people to speak out in support of the bill. Of course, you guys are aware of our largest lobbying day, the Day for All People. You're invited to that lobbying day, but also just general committee meetings when we know that this bill may be up for committee. We'd love to have you all support in the room, whether it be verbal testimony or whether it just be a show of physical support with bodies in the hearing. So I hope that was a pretty good coverage, and I'll be happy to answer any questions and let me know what I can do to help.
Thank you so much. I put the chat, or I put the website for Virginia Consensus for Higher Ed in Prison in the chat, along with those 4 like areas of support that Kenneth went over. But yeah, love to open the floor for questions. Are there questions about the concept of higher ed in prison? And or are there questions about how you or how your faith community can support?
With the bipartisan support, did Governor Youngkin have a rationale or an explanation for what his concerns were? What was his reservations? Because it sounds like the coalition of support exists. It's just one individual is not supporting, and he will not be in that position by definition next year. I don't know where the 2 candidates stand on this issue. So maybe Kenneth, you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to. It's a great question. The short answer is we didn't really get any reasonable rationale. It didn't make sense for him to veto the bill. The governor actually issued Executive Order 36 last October or November. And this bill was like directly in line with the language they used in Executive Order 36. So we once we saw the support that we were getting in the General Assembly, I actually felt pretty confident that this bill was going to get passed. And so all he did was say that he wanted to delay the enactment for a year. But that meant delaying the enactment for this bill meant that it would have pushed the whole study off for a whole nother year while we already had a JLARC study and happen. So we didn't support that. This would have delayed an issue, another kick the bucket, another 2 or 3 years down the road. And we just didn't want to go with that. And at the same time, we'd rather go through and argue it again in General Assembly with a more comprehensive bill without him in the governor's seat and hoping to getting something passed that kind of was more suited for what we want to do anyway. What we would like to do is carve out a bill directly for college and prison. College and prison is its own animal. It's of course it's an educational offering, but it has so many regulations, which is why we were able to bring a panel together at our last event called Education in a Highly Regulated Context, because the Department of Corrections is highly regulated, but so is funding higher education in general. And so we wanted these people in the same room to be able to discuss why these offerings have to be meet a certain standard in order for these guys to receive Pell funding and not lose access to their funds. So, you know, the classroom experience has to mirror the free counterparts. It should feel like a college campus or as close as we can get to it. And so, you know, there's a lot of, you can't just do a fly by night college course in prison. It has to be exactly the way it's supposed to be in order for these folks to be able to take advantage of Pell funding. So no, we never got a clear answer why he wanted to delay it. Perhaps he just didn't want to see it go into law under his watch. But we are not daunted at all, and the partners and stakeholders are actually pretty excited about getting this done. So I'm pretty optimistic about what next year will mean.
And where do the two candidates for governor stand on this initiative?
So we're actually looking forward to a meeting with governors with our candidate for Governor Spanberger soon, and we're waiting on response, I think, from Winsome Sears for a candidate forum, and we're hoping to get some like direct answers, like about that. I know that we'll definitely bring that up in said meeting. I will say, considering the support and considering that, no matter how you frame this, some people don't like the feel good stories and charitable nature of these kind of things. But this is not that. This is one of those practical things that can be embraced across the aisle. Like, this workforce angle is a real thing. And employers are really hungry for qualified workers. And to say that this particular demographic, it has a unique skill set and a higher retention rate, makes them really valuable to employers. So I don't anticipate anything but support from both candidates, and I would be surprised if either of them wouldn't support an initiative like this, especially with so many legislators in the GA supporting it last year.
Hey, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kenneth, it sounds like the support is there, grassroots support, legislative support, but any insight on possible threats to funding for Pell Grants?
So that's another good question. So the short answer again is not so much, other than the usual rumblings when Trump was first elected, the dissolving of the Department of Education and things that we heard like that. But we haven't seen any really direct threat to Pell funding. And like I said, Trump was the one that actually signed this legislation. That's of all the crummy things he's done, this particular issue is something that he seems to have tapped into. We had a Jeffrey Krasinski was the keynote speaker, who and a Republican, and he was the keynote speaker for our initiative. I mean, for our event last week, and he talked about a lot of these issues in a way that made sense for this particular initiative. So that leads me to believe that we're pretty safe on that end too. I mean, you can never be too safe. Money's being snatched from everywhere, but for right now, Pell funding has remained untouched, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Yes, Missionary Bradley, I see your hand up as well.
This is really something that's really going on in the world today. I know firsthand concerning prison and prisoners that have been in the system and then they come out. And I know a prominent person that had higher education and of their own business. This person went back. So we need mentors. We can educate people, they can educate themselves, but we still need mentors to help people that come out of incarceration and become successful, but go back into the world's ways of drugs and alcohol, and they lost everything. So do you have mentors that can mentor them once they come out of incarceration to be in the right mind frame to stay away from the old ways and soar. And this was a highly educated person, and I was just shocked. And that's one situation when it comes to incarceration. Um, you still have the old ways of thinking. You know, it's like they're used to sitting down in prison, but it's not the way it is when you come out. You have to, you know, be productive. You have to work, and you have to be the best that you can. But from what I'm seeing, and the people I talk to, and I've been around a lot of people that have been inside as well as outside, and a lot of these people are not staying focused, and they don't have mentors outside of the systems. So this is something that's not on subject, but it needs to be brought up. Thank you.
Very, really appreciate you lifting that up. And actually, it's very on subject. The thing about any criminal justice reform issue, it does not exist on an island. It does not exist on a silo. All of these things are tied together. We here at VCHEP, part of what I was saying in the beginning is that we're making this concerted reach out to reentry organizations because we want these direct services available to people upon their release. And yes, they involve mentorships, and there are a lot of mentor programs that we're actually in tune with, and are looking to be able to see those services get offered to people upon education is just one part, and that's the part that we are focused on. But like you say, you offer that education, but you're also going to need some general guidance.
That's
And
it.
as a person who spent 22 years incarcerated for a nonviolent drug charge, I can speak directly to how important mentorship has been to me, even to this day. And I've been home almost 5 years, and I still need advice and questions about how to proceed and how to plan for life as I get older. And so, a great portion of my life was taken away. And I know a lot of my friends have the same issues as they come home. So yes, we are very connected to the idea of mentorship and reentry as a part of education. That's why outreach to reentry is so important. And our event in November that I was talking about that will bring folks like you together with reentry organizations is aimed at that very thing. Having a comprehensive talk about how do we make sure that either folks can continue education upon their release or that they are able to get the employment that they have earned with the degrees that they have earned. So I'm glad you lifted that up. That's a really important issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like there is good energy in anticipation for the November event. Should I tell people to mark their calendars? I think I'm going to tell you all to mark your calendars. It will indeed be, no, wait, have we confirmed it, Kenneth? It doesn't conflict with the conference, right?
I do not know. So we will hesitate to let the tentative date out. We got to do a little bit more
Okay.
research. We had a date of November the 13th. We're trying to figure it all out. So we probably
You
need to
can
dig a little deeper.
pencil November 13th in the evening in, but we will confirm when we have a finalized one. There might be a conflict. It will be after the elections and before Thanksgiving, Day of Remembrance. So sometime in that 3-week window, we'll be getting together.
Okay.
Any other questions related to higher ed in prison, how you can get involved, both on the advocacy and on the outreach side? Okay. Thank you all so much.